Detroit is different. Yeah, Detroit is different. Words of the streets, stories in life we lead. Detroit is different. Detroit is different. Detroit is different. Words of the streets, stories in life we lead. Yeah, Detroit is different. Detroit is different. Detroit is different. Words of the streets, stories in life we lead. Detroit is different.
Welcome back to the Detroit is Different podcast studios. And here today, I have somebody that is a guest that is, for sure, a friend of community. A couple blocks further west. We can't hold that against her that she's from the McKenzie neighborhood. But Northwestern, we know we love, even though I'm in the central neighborhood. Ain't that something? And with that, immersed in some of the things that I've done, gathering people outside, inside the Black community of Detroit to enjoy different things and sharing family, sharing urban gardening, and a lot of that down-home love that you only get in Detroit. Victoria, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great today, Kyrie. How are you?
All is well. All is well. So you're a little familiar with this Detroit is Different process. See, bit. It's like you got it's like she has like the materials in place, the thinker. So I'm gonna throw this one at you. Yo, people in the roots of Detroit, how about?
All right. So all four of my grandparents migrated to Detroit from other states outside of Michigan.
So all the grands came here.
The grands came here.
So that means that you're third generation then.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So on my dad's side of the family, my grandmother, Marie, she was born in North Carolina.
Whereabouts?
Winton.
Winton.
Don't ask me where
that is. Sounds like they was growing tobacco over there. That sounds like a tobacco road.
Exactly right. So she was born in Winton, North Carolina, migrated here. And then my grandfather on my dad's side, Henry Turner, he was born in St. Louis, Missouri.
For real?
Yeah.
Okay, so he already migrated a little bit from the South. They fam. And then from St. Louis, it's like,
yeah.
Can't do this.
So
gotta get to Detroit.
So my grandfather on my dad's side, Henry Turner, he migrated here. I never got a chance to meet him. He died shortly before my parents got married. But my dad talks about him. He speculates that he moved here because he couldn't deal with the racism in Missouri.
Yeah.
And while he was in Detroit, and I thought this was so funny, he would sometimes use his brother's name, William, who was still back in Missouri, because he was holding 2 full-time jobs. So he was working for Great Lakes Steel and Ford Motor Company.
Wow.
For 20-something years.
See, and now as we get into a lot of this environmental justice, especially over what's happening in steel, and we know that a lot of Black folks was working in them foundries.
Right.
You know, I can only imagine what impacts that had on his health.
For sure. He was also a boxer.
For real?
He was a boxer. He boxed at Joe Louis Arena, and his boxing name was Kid Henney.
Kid Henney?
Yeah.
How did he get that name?
I don't know. I'm like, yeah. So my dad was really into that. Like I said, I didn't get a chance to meet him when I was growing up. So my dad really wanted a son first. My name would have been Nolan Lamar. I'm so glad to be Victoria.
Okay, did he teach you a good right hook?
Well, he used to like pop me in my right arm sometimes, and I know he was playing, but that used to hurt. Like, that wasn't cool. So
he was trying to keep you on your toes.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so they raised their children in River Rouge. That's where my dad grew up.
Okay. All right, so that downriver community, because that's how I kind of look at it, and cutting the teeth down there. That's interesting. What year did they get here, and did your grandparents meet in Detroit?
To my understanding, they met here in Detroit.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm not really sure what year. I believe they had all their children. They would have had all their children here because they met here.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then on mom's side.
So my mom's mother, who I call Granny, her name was Ora Bell, and after she was married, her last name was Terry. She was born in Jackson, Mississippi. And my grandfather, Carnegie Terry, they all called him Jack.
That's an old school name.
That's
Say
an old
that
school
again.
name. Carnegie.
Oh, man.
Carnegie Jack Terry.
Uh-huh.
He was born in Terry, Louisiana.
Okay, so the name is in the name.
That's right. The name is in the name. So he served in the U.S. Army. When he returned, he married Granny, and they had children in Louisiana, except for my mother. So there's a decent spread between my mom, she's the youngest, and her other siblings. So they were all born down there. And then after they moved to Detroit, my mom was born here at the Black-owned hospital, Burton Mercy.
Okay, so I definitely got these questions too.
Yeah.
So first, you said he served. What war?
Oh, Kyrie, I don't know what war. What I'm not sure.
What years? You're unsure?
I'm not
Because it
sure
possibly was World War II. I'm guessing, possibly.
Yeah,
But
that sounds
here nor
it's gotta
there.
be.
Like we're thinking
Mhm.
about the 40s, and also Mississippi, Louisiana, so far west. You got a lot of that family west that make their way to Detroit, because a lot of times along those migration patterns of the Great Migration pattern of people coming up this way, a lot of west went further west, like to California, St. Louis, Chicago, Milwaukee, those places, instead of coming up to Detroit. Do you know what it was that brought them from that Louisiana space up to Detroit?
I'm not sure what brought them to Detroit specifically. I mean, probably for most, though, coming up north to look for work and the ability to just move a little bit more freely, right? So so they were from Terry, Louisiana. Well, he was from Terry, Louisiana, and you're right. So the name is...
It's in the name.
It's in the name. So what happened with that? So there was an Irishman named James Terry who he had a son with his wife, his white wife, who was killed in the Confederate Army. And so James Terry owned this land in West Carroll Parish, which is the far north parish in Louisiana. And he, since his white son had been killed, he left that land to his 4 black sons. And he also had, they had a sister as well, but at that time women couldn't own land. And so he left that land that would later become Terry, Louisiana, to his black sons. And, and then George, which is one of those sons, he actually raised my grandfather, so Papa, I just call him Papa, and that was his grandson. So Papa was raised by his grandfather, who was George, who was left that land from Terry.
Okay. All right. So I got to unpack that. It's like, I know sometimes I'm looking down and stuff. People are thinking, what's going on? It's always some Detroit is different things happening. But my presence of mind and these ears, they get better over the years. So I heard Irishman.
Yes.
Black sons. Different spaces. Also parishes. So like due to... I should have been paying more attention last time I was on that New Orleans bus tour. but parishes could be looked at like districts or counties. Louisiana is so different than a lot of other spaces in the United States because of it was a French territory at one point in time and a Spanish territory at one point in time. Detroit, French territory as well. So it's functions, and then not just to mention that, just all of the flow of like where the Mississippi ends there, like it functions a little bit differently. And even when we look at how race was looked at, though still very heavy, Louisiana carried it a little bit different as those fights for Louisiana and that real control of the Mississippi. A lot of like the French and the Spanish looked at it like, hey, we need to integrate with natives and black folks because we want to make sure that we can hold the territory, which changes the flow of even what we look at as Cajun or Creole or all that culture that's down there in Louisiana itself, right? So connected to this, your family roots connect into some of that Louisiana, can't think of a better word, gumbo of how of how it kind of functions, it sounds like.
Yeah, and actually there's a book, it's called Between the Rivers, a West Carroll Chronicle, and there's a small section in the middle of the book that talks about how Terry was formed. And as I was reading it, even the way it was positioned, very casually, just, James Terry, like others, had a Negro family in the backyard. I was like, what? I mean, just the way, so it was very, it was different.
You got that right.
Yeah.
So, and then also similar to Benjamin Franklin and the Sally Hemings story, like, it's painted as if this is like romantic relationships, and some of them were, but also some of this was forced.
Of course. Some
people may say that happens a lot to this day too. Shout out to Sasha Center and Kalima and all the work they're doing. But definitely, I can say that Louisiana, because of a lot of the political stuff happening at the time, it was a lot different, even for all types of like religion, race, culture. You know what I'm saying? Congo Square and jazz and like just the culture. It feels different naturally because I think that it had to function. It had to function in a different space just due to, it wasn't what quote unquote the US was. So like you say, the book just said like, hey, a Negro family in the back like everybody had.
Right. Yeah. So that's how Terry was formed. And I've been down there a few times. I've taken my children down there. And there's a family cemetery there behind the church. And it was interesting to walk through there. What touched me the most was there was a gravestone. It was pretty small, maybe a little larger than the size of a brick. And it had hands scratched into it, just mom.
Wow.
And we don't know who that is.
Whose mom that is.
Exactly.
Also, the other thing about some of those spaces, not there at least, but like especially in New Orleans, the raised graves because of the bayou.
Mm-hmm.
So different spots throughout Louisiana has that, not just New Orleans.
Yeah.
Because that whole sea level above and what's below, and also the humidity. If you ever there, you got to go to New Orleans, Louisiana, and Mississippi at the right time of the year. Let's just uplift that.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
So, so that brings mom's side. Where do they settle in Detroit?
On the west side of Detroit. So, Papa owned several properties on Vinewood, right off West Grand Boulevard and Tireman over there.
Vinewood.
Yeah.
Northwestern.
So, that's right.
There we go. Okay. So, a couple properties on Vinewood.
Well, I mean, almost the whole block, I would say, at
the
some
whole
point.
block.
Just about.
What block?
So, the block right behind Share House.
So, like, right across the street from Northwestern, kind of,
yeah, right.
sort of.
It's right down. I mean, you can walk there.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And that community, what was it that brought them over there? Why do you think they picked there?
Not sure why they picked there, if it was just an opportunity. But Papa started to, purchase properties. He became a landlord over there, and they had community. So my mom was raised in that house, and when I was growing up, we spent some time over there visiting with Granny and Papa.
Okay, so that means that your mom and your aunties probably got stories of like going to see little Michael Jackson at the Olympia Stadium and stuff like that. So people kind of get and I know this history from my Northwestern history. Northwestern High School, where it is now, the new Northwestern, that wasn't now it's considered the new Northwestern. Now it's old to me and everybody else, but before, Olympia was over there. Olympia was Olympia Field, Olympia Stadium, where the Red Wings play, and many concerts. The community over there, White's Records over there. So much of like the family I know that owned Steve Soul Food had their meat markets and things like that. Like it was one of those communities especially pre how I hear it, like before 96, people always talk about 75 freeway, but the 96 freeway really broke up another large segment of a black community too.
It did. So
Vinewood, that neighborhood, and your family being over there, Papa is buying properties, and you said like almost the whole block. What do you was that like even what you remember as a kid? Do you connect with that community the same?
I remember visiting over there some, walking to like the small store with Granny, picking up chips, and she would cook and they would fry fish and all that. So what I remember most is I actually bought a home from Papa once I, grew up and got married and started having children. So lived over there for a little while. The neighborhood had changed by then. And at some point when I was young, Papa started to lose his sight. And so what was changing in the community, he couldn't see what was happening. I'm sure he still had in his mind a space that was flourishing, and it was a real decline in the community by that time, though.
Interesting. All right. So now I guess let's talk about you and where you come up. What community do you grow up in? What neighborhood? And then brothers and sisters?
Yeah. So I'm the oldest of 4 children by both of my parents. And then my dad had 3 more children in Chicago they're much younger than us. But we grew up on Santa Rosa off of 7 Mile.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was nice over there. Safe community. We spent a lot of time outside riding bikes. We knew all the neighbors. Farmer Jack was right there. I got my ears pierced at Terry's place, which is in that complex.
Hilarious.
Yeah. So
hilarious.
My parents banked at First Independence, which I didn't learn until probably about 10 years ago that it was a black-owned bank.
But shout out Don Davis.
They banked there. And it was just real good community. My mom always baked for the neighbors, new neighbors that were coming in. It was welcoming. We always were entertaining family for, family and friends for dinner, especially on Sundays. My dad was a pastor. He has been since I was really small, and he would run like 3-on-3 basketball tournaments in the backyard. He used that as part of his outreach ministry. So, yeah, just really engaged. It was a good space to be in.
Okay, a couple questions already unpacked from what you just shared.
Okay.
First question that I have is, all right, you grew up on real 7 Mile, because there's a lot of people that grow up like 1 block from 6 Mile and then say, I'm on 7 Mile. So you really grew up
on that first block. Yeah.
All right, and you shared a whole lot of like what that was, but people talk about like just this history of that connection of 7 Mile. What era were you there? Because the nostalgia of people saying like, oh man, 7 Mile, you didn't even need to go to Belle Isle, and just depending upon what you hear, because it's one of the iconic streets in Detroit, and it's so much I think of when I hear that name. So what era are you there, and what stands out just about the culture of 7 Mile?
So we were there, it had to be middle to late 80s.
Okay.
Yeah, and everything was there. I mean, we walked to the library. Schools were walkable. Like I said, the grocery store was right there. It was nice. I mean, and so now it wasn't, I don't recall it being like Fashion Avenue being on like the level it is right now, though. But you definitely could access what you needed right there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now when you hear it, because like you can think multiple things. So when you hear 7 Mile, what's the immediate culture you think?
Well, okay, like I think more about Livernois than 7 Mile now, though. That's the thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't feel like there's a whole lot going on 7 Mile itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, because when I hear 7 Mile, it's like 2 7 Miles I think of, which are completely different than what they were at one point in time. I think 7 Mile in Southfield, Freeway, and I think 7 Mile and Van Dyke, which are like whole different universes. But that's kind of what I think when I hear it, because I think east and west a little bit. And that's why it's just like so interesting of a street that people uplift so much, where I think to myself, like, I don't know what people think when they think that. And then just getting somebody that was living there at one point in time, that characterizes it different. And then your father, a pastor, what denomination of a church?
Baptist.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So he studied and interacted with what's it called? The North American Baptist Conference or something. So he went around to different churches and spoke.
Convocations.
All that.
Okay.
Yeah. A lot of white churches. And he had his own church in Southfield. But we definitely spent a lot of time visiting churches across Metro Detroit that were predominantly white.
Wow.
A different kind of experience.
That I was going to say, what was that like? First off, it's like you a PK, as they say, preacher's kid, and you the black PK at these white Baptist churches. Because when I think Baptist, I think like that Council of Baptist Pastors here that was so instrumental with a lot of things. Shout out to Fred G. Sampson and Frida and all of them. Like, that's kind of the what we think. But Baptist is huge, especially like Southern Baptist. A lot of white folks are Southern Baptists. Let's just put it like that. So, you know what I mean? So, What was that experience like? Just the culture of church, and I'm assuming also you probably were in church almost every day, at least 4 days a week for like 8 hours or something as a kid, probably.
Yeah, we were in church a lot, whether it was on Sundays or for Bible study or some type of other type of church activity or event in between. For the most part, I mean, the experience was okay. I feel like we were treated relatively well, but you kind of had this feeling of being out of place. I mean, you're already, as the preacher's family, sitting on the front row, having to stand up. It's just like everybody's looking at you. And then we're standing out because these are like almost all white churches. And I will say, I remember distinctly coming into a Sunday school class at one of the churches. And as soon as my sister and I walked in, one of the girls in the class said, "Oh, here come the brownies."
Wow.
Yeah. And I mean, we couldn't do anything but just sit down, you know, but to have that, I mean, you know, we're the guest pastors, family coming in, and that's how you react. So, and then we also went to Macomb Christian Schools when I was in 5th grade. And similarly, my sister and I, we were the only black girls there. And then there were 2 boys from a black family that were there as well. So there's just the 4 of us in that school. And same thing, just a feeling of isolation in that space. I was happy to get back to Detroit Public Schools.
I feel that. So let's talk about a little bit of that DPS journey. Where do you go?
Yeah. So I started out at Pastoral Elementary.
Okay.
Yeah. And I still remember my first day of kindergarten. I don't know if my mom just wasn't sure about like what time school got out, but I was standing out there. Everybody was picked up except me. And so,
it's like you started off hating school. Like, what is going on?
No, I mean, school was good though. And so kindergarten was cool. Our family doesn't celebrate Halloween, but I distinctly remember my mom sewing me a beautiful strawberry shortcake costume for Halloween in kindergarten. It was big, like the hat was really big. She stuffed it with a bunch of newspaper. Like it was
hilarious.
I was like barely balancing on my head. And so, and then my favorite teacher was Gregory Dean Crouch.
Okay.
Mr. Crouch. And so we had him for 1st and 2nd grade, I think it was. And I think we spent more time on field trips than in the classroom.
Where did you guys go?
We were at the zoo all the time.
For real?
And Mr. Crouch used to write songs about animals. He would bring his guitar. He was this like young, white, like hippie dude. He was a lot of fun though.
Okay.
And he would write songs about animals. I know some of them still. I will not sing them.
I was gonna say you gotta sing something.
I will not.
Hilarious.
But I do still know some of them.
So he was like Peter, Paul, and Mary kind of, type of music. I'm guessing like folk, like so. Okay,
Yeah, folks.
Yeah. I don't know if people know Peter, Paul, and Mary, like the Puff the Magic Dragon and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
So we had a good time. We would go on these trips in his blue van. This van did not have seats in the back. We would just pile up in here. We would drink Mountain Dew, which he called Mountain Don't. It's just like nobody would get away with this in school today.
Yeah, I was gonna say that all of this sounds like this would get sanctioned against. It would be known.
Right. He took us to his house before.
Oh yeah, that definitely would not happen.
That would not be happening.
I'm pretty sure he may have had a dispensary card before there were dispensaries.
I know, right? But his living room, and I remember as a child thinking like, oh yeah, he don't have a wife. His whole living room was full of stuffed, it looked like a zoo.
Wow.
It was full of stuffed animals, like huge, like elephant and all this and stuff. So he was just a different kind of dude. But we had a lot of fun. We learned a lot. And the second year that we had him, he got sick in the middle of the year.
Oh, man.
My best friend, Chad Bell, was my best friend at the time. We were the two in class just crying because they say he wasn't coming back. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
What did, so animals, like, because kids always have an affinity to animals, but were you already kind of more interested, or was it just the fact that Mr. Crouch was cool?
Well, I mean, Mr. Crouch was really cool. I already had an affinity to animals, and we grew up with pets. We had dogs, cats, rabbits, birds, fish.
Yeah, birds.
We had birds.
Oh, that's some dedicated parents right there.
Yeah, my dad's really into animals, so we always were raising animals. So yeah,
because birds are for anybody that's grown up in a home with a bird. First off, the noise, and the cleanliness. Bird is high level pet parenting.
Yeah.
So now, I guess, just like at the zoo, you're learning and just exploring. And did you always just go to the Detroit Zoo? Did you all go to the Belle Isle Zoo? Where did you all go?
Both.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we went to both, and like I said, just learned a lot, and a lot of just exploratory learning. And then we went to a lot of different museums as well. But I remember the zoo the most. I mean, and just a lot, like I said, just exploratory learning, even in the classroom. So he just had a different way of just allowing us to be kids.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So from elementary, middle, and high, where you go?
So like I said, Pasteur for elementary, then went to Macomb Christian School for 5th grade, came back to DPS and was at Bagley for 6th grade real quick.
Okay.
After that, we moved to Chicago.
Chicago.
Yeah. So, outside of Chicago, Bellwood was the name of the town.
Okay. In what era?
So that would have been 1992.
Okay.
Yeah, because I graduated from middle school in 94.
All right. So 92, you're going to Chicago in the era where it's like, oh, Michael Jordan. We hate you as a Piston fan.
Yep, Michael Jordan was big. So, we got over there, and my dad's a real big basketball fan. I mean, I was playing basketball as soon as I could walk.
I was thinking that with your height, that naturally he would have put the ball in your hand because you said the 3-on-3 tournaments and everything like that.
Right.
So you were playing you said since you could walk. Did you like playing, or was it one of those things where you just kind of did it because your dad liked it, sort of, and wanted you to?
I did enjoy it, but it also didn't feel like an option.
Man.
So coming up, like I was in basketball camps over the summer. It was basketball all the way. So I played basketball through sophomore year of high school, and then I learned how to swim and loved it, and dedicated my last 2 years of high school. I dropped all my other sports and just swam year round.
Okay. All right. And what position did you play when you played basketball? And what did you like about swimming so much more?
I played center, which in middle school, my coach started having me to practice like a weak side forward position, and I didn't understand why, because I was always taller. I I measured like 5'10" for my 8th grade graduation cap and gown.
Wow.
And I am still 5'10" right now.
Mm-hmm.
So
you were like in your middle school graduation picture, it was like everybody else here, then you're there.
Yes, exactly. And so I was wondering, I'm like, I play center. That's what I play. I stay down here by the basket. They pass it to me and I put it in. But he was looking at my feet and he said, "You're not going to be tall though. I see your feet." And it almost like ever since he said that, I didn't grow anymore.
Wow.
So, yeah. So, so I played basketball. I ran track. Had my first track meet at Bagley.
Okay.
Yeah, and I ran the 400.
You ran the 4. Okay.
That was my race all the way through my track career. My dad trained me over at UD.
Okay.
And I loved track. I would do the 400, 800. I did not like the mile. That's too much.
It's a lot.
So, and then I did switch over to swimming. I don't know. I learned how to swim. It was different. Nobody in my family was a swimmer. And I just took to it. And I like the individual. I probably like the most the individual nature of the sport. Mm-hmm. Like we were a team and we worked together, but when you got into your race, it was your race, to the point where even though coach would be on, standing on the deck and trying to give instruction, you really can't hear anything. Like you are just by yourself in the water. And I enjoyed that.
And what do you think athletics, when you're younger, what do you think that poured into you, and how do you still use that?
Kyrie, I have an obsession with like pushing myself to the limit. So we would run with my dad on Outer Drive, my sister and I, and he would leave us. His legs were long. My dad's 5. My dad is 6'6".
Wow.
He would leave us and he would go as far as I don't know where he used to go, and he would circle back around and pick us up on the way home. But every time I would try to get a little bit further before he circled back and made it back to us. And then even at that first track meet, I remember at the end of that race being so out of breath and like dizzy that I couldn't even think. And every race after that, I would strive to feel like that at the end, or I felt like I didn't push myself enough.
Wow.
And so I do that. I push myself physically. I push myself mentally. I don't know. I'm always going for that, like, almost that exhaustion feeling, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so the athleticism knows like that balance of how far you can go in getting to that point. So that does frame things. So from Chicago, how do you get back to Detroit?
So after Chicago, so Papa passed away, and Mom.
Condolences.
Thank you. Mom, I'm sorry. Papa did not pass away. Papa passed away later. Granny passed away, and Mom came back to Detroit to take care of Papa. He was blind.
What era is this?
So this was around 97, because I stayed in Chicago one more year to finish high school. I graduated in 98. And then I followed Mom back this way. I actually went to Boston University for a year real quick. Way too expensive to be there. And then I ended up back here in Detroit.
Okay. On Vinewood. So coming back to Detroit from Chicago, and I'm guessing also at this point in time, your mom and dad are not together.
Correct.
So a lot of things changes in life. You're graduating from high school, back with Mom, on Vinewood, in the city of Detroit as an adult now. Are you still keeping up? I mean, you're traveling back and forth like with any of your friends, your homies. Like, what's that connection of like just your social circle when you get back to Detroit?
Yeah, the social circle, see, it's different now. Like, you could stay connected. We have so many electronic ways to stay connected. So, like, I'm not connected with anybody from elementary school, which is disappointing. I wish that when we moved to Chicago, I had held on to, I had like a little kid phone book with some phone numbers. You know what I mean? Like, so I didn't stay in touch with those folks. And I'm in touch with, really at this point, just one friend from high school. I have some others. If I want to get in touch with them, I know how to.
You can't reach out to them.
Yeah.
But upon coming back, you're almost like reestablishing roots and connections. So
I'm
I'm
new
guessing,
to Detroit.
yeah. So like you coming back and you just hanging out with your granddad, your mom, and your family.
Exactly. It was really all about family, and then having to build and establish new relationships. And the neighborhood was different. So we're back on Vinewood, where my mom was raised, in that house.
Yep.
And mind you, like, childhood was 7 Mile Livernois area. We moved to Chicago. We're living in Bellwood, which is a suburb of Chicago. You know, well taken care of community, good schools and everything. We come back to Vinewood, which had declined so much. I mean, we had a lot of drug activity going on. I saw my first community shooting, if we can just call it that, on Vinewood. It was definitely a culture shock. I'm like, what did we just walk into here?
I can definitely tell you, as I graduated from Northwestern in 2001, so many of my let's just put it like this. Many of the people that started in enrollment, because some of my classmates did not necessarily get through the whole year, but in those streets in Vinewood and just that community, I mean, it's a hotel like right across the street from Northwestern to this day. There's just, or a motel, not a hotel. 'Cause a hotel has, I think, 3 floors. Motels have either 1 or 2. It's a motel like directly across the street from Northwestern, where, Lord knows, all types of activity is going on. And then it's a one even further up the block where it's like, okay, you think that's a place with character, to say the least. The place up the block has even more character. So just that Northwestern journey, knowing Vinewood and what's happening, yeah, it's as my senior year, Lil Wayne says, the block is hot. The block is hot. It's a lot of activity. A lot of activity because I'm going to characterize it at that time. The community really is in that transitional phase of legacy-owned homes from like elders like your grandfather passing on to the family members that stayed in Detroit that probably are like facing other circumstances that many of the people that had that could get more adjusted to like corporate structures that are away from industry, because these communities were created for the industrial age, could not get. So to make it more plain, the people that stayed in community, that stay still this day in communities like mine, I think many people feel forced to be here. And the minute that a person kind of reaches a level of success, they're going to leave. So some of the people feel frustrated, feel trapped. It's very scarce resources when it comes to economic resources. And it leads to the smallest problem becoming the largest problem, which can lead to, as you say, community shootings, community fighting, or just plain out depression, just a lot of frustration, sadness. It can be heavy. So it's the beacons of hope that we can pour in that sometimes people can connect to, that ground people in communities like ours, like the gardening and acts like that, because it's a lot that people are facing.
For sure. And at that time, I didn't know how to take that. And I was newly married, had just had my son. And so we actually moved to Southwest Detroit for a few years on Beatrice. And basically to get away from Vinewood at that point. I mean, we still own the home, but I was like, I can't.
It was too heavy.
Raise my son here.
Yeah.
You know, so now I would say, as I've learned, as I've grown, and my children are grown now as well, I just kind of have more of a stay mentality. So I live on Clover Lawn now. Had some challenges over there too. But but I want to stay and like see it through. Like, how can we fix this situation? And when you, like you said, become successful and you leave, you just compound the issue that you leave behind. You might fix it for yourself because now you're somewhere better. But what about those that you left?
It's the narrative we've heard from rappers for so long, when people say like, why do you glorify so much violence? Why do you glorify all the gangsterism? Why do you glorify this? Which I still push back on it, but it's an essence of truth that the people that a lot of the kids are gonna see are the people that function in the economies of street life. You know, as shout out to Maceo, as they say, the streets are always hiring. You know, the streets is hiring. You know what I'm saying? As far as like, and it's no Detroiters at Work program. It's no skilled trades. It's happening, and that's what's active. So that's what a lot of people are seeing. You know, Dr. Yusef Bunchy Shakur, right there in that Vinewood community, 48208 Zone 8. That's there. You know, and that's who's there. So it's like, what other options? What else are you seeing? What other opportunities right there are abundantly for you other than a lot of counterculture things to what you would think would function, because so much of these communities were really anchored and brought to life because of industries that no longer are here anymore. Right. And as the industry left, the people that could leave left too. So the people that stay, like I say, many of my neighbors feel trapped. And finding these solutions, it can be a task, because a lot of it is that mental state of how you process that. You say you're a young family, like, and I'm sure your grandfather and your mother's just in a caretaking journey. And shout out to all the caretakers, because even my journey in caretaking has been, it's a lot. So your mother's there, your grandfather, visually impaired, but also possibly even psychologically impaired, even if he visually could see of what he's looking at, similar to like most people that have been in spaces for a long time. What do you think at that time would have been a resource to ground you, your husband, and your newborn son in a community like that, to have more understanding and empathy for what's happening?
That's a good question. Just thinking about what we could have needed at that time to make a difference, right? Instead of leave. Because we had family on the block. My uncle and aunt were right there. I don't know. We would have need to come together and organize like a plan to build the relationship, because even there was even fighting between neighbors. Like, how do we build these relationships and support each other in a way so that needs are getting met? Because at the end of the day, that's really why people are frustrated,
yes,
and acting out, is because their needs are not getting met. So how do we create resources between ourselves, bring resources in so people can start having needs met, so they're not in like a survival mode, and we can start thinking like higher level on how do we take ourselves to the next level. Just having the insight to think about that, I just wasn't there at the time.
Yeah. And I mean, who would necessarily expect that, especially being like some of that background and where you're coming from. You know, you're coming from a suburb of Chicago, 1 year on campus at Boston University, and you're on a block where it's hot now.
Right.
You know, and you're probably looking at your auntie and your uncle like, hey, this ain't normal. Where they're like, gotta kind of look at it like a snowstorm. You know what I'm saying? Some days it may be 2 inches, some days it may be 2 feet. You know what I'm saying? You got to know how to navigate it.
Yeah.
You know, so Southwest from there, and then now over to Cloverlawn. Is Southwest, what was that like?
Southwest was, at that time, it was pretty quiet. Didn't have concerns on that particular block. I know we've got some pockets in Southwest where there could be some challenges. I didn't experience any of that when we were over there.
Okay.
Right, yeah.
Okay, and then what led you over to Cloverlawn, where you at?
So made a few stops before Cloverlawn. So stayed on the east side for a minute, actually stayed in Clinton Township for a minute. And then landed on Clover Lawn. Actually purchased that home from the daughter of Phyllis Sanko, Auntie Phyllis was my children's father's aunt. And I did a lot of work with her. She was an icon down at the African World Festival, Caribbean festivals, making African-style greens. She's been on news about those greens.
Very much so.
Yeah. And so I cooked with her for several years, and she lived in that house. So we live in that house now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Ain't that something? Because in my short stint pre-Northwestern, King Wadia went there.
That's right.
Definitely know that.
Wadia.
I know Wadia. I told her, I was like, yo, you need to get in the collard green cook-off because your mother has made the best greens I've ever had. Rest in peace. So
that's right.
Definitely, yeah. I was shocked. I was shocked that those greens were that good.
They are so good. And I'm going to share this with you too. It's really, I loved Auntie Phyllis. I mean, she was just a real grounding in that family. I was married into the family. But I had a really special connection with her. And so it feels so good to live in her house now. And I remember when we moved into the house that day, the moving van was backed up to the house. And, when she passed away, I just miss her so much. And nobody could talk like her. I have pictures of her, but I wish I had a recording of her voice, right? And so I step outside on the porch and I look down and there's this lady standing there and I thought I saw a ghost. Like she looked exactly like Auntie Phyllis. And then she started to speak to me and then I really couldn't move. She probably thought, she's like, what's wrong with this girl? She won't even speak back to me. I couldn't say anything because I thought I was looking at Auntie Phyllis. It was her sister Lulu.
Okay.
Who had come back to visit from Liberia. I didn't know. I met Auntie Lulu like once.
Okay.
And I just cried like after really like set in because I felt like on that day, Auntie Phyllis was like welcoming me into her home. And it just feels good to be there.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's deep. That's very deep. And just knowing those connections of those iterations of like when I think of African World Festival, that's immediately one of those things that I think about. And you were actually working in that space along with that family.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we used to serve the entertainers. They used to come in, and Auntie Phyllis was so funny because she would say, I want you serving the entertainers. So she would have me put on like something nice to wear to go back there and serve and everything. But Kyrie, I'm a worker. I like to be on the grill, on the stove and everything. And so by the end of it, that's what I ended up doing. I'm like, why did I put this on? I'm back here cooking.
Hilarious. You done got pot liquor on some great Liberian garb.
Right. Exactly. So.
All right. So now in that community, we've met in a lot of your organizing efforts. What was the spark into that?
The spark into that, in 2020 on Clover Lawn, and you'll be familiar with this, we had an issue over the summer with a lot of convening of drag racing and drifting right there at Clover Lawn, Oakman, Grand River on that corner. And I could see that corner from my bedroom window. And it would never fail. Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night, you couldn't even see the ground with how many people would gather there. And, I believe that people need a space to gather. People need a space to have fun. But this is like you're on our front lawn. You're in our backyard. And there's noise throughout the whole night. And then most generally in the morning, a shootout in the morning. And it was a really scary time. I mean, I remember like crawling on the floor at night, knocking on my kids' doors, telling them, get on the floor because they were shooting, because they would shoot like running between our houses and everything. It was completely out of control, and the police didn't know how to get a handle on it. And as a neighborhood, we just wanted it to stop. And so one Sunday morning, a bunch of us neighbors went down to that corner early because there had been a shooting, and a man had been killed in his car in that intersection. And on that day, we decided we're not doing this anymore. And that's when we formed the Grand River Community Block Club. And we worked with community organizations. We had conversations with the police department about proactive ways we can deal with this, because it wasn't safe for everyone to gather and then a handful of police come into the situation. So it was about like preventing the gathering from happening in the first place. And so that's really when I started like into like community organizing, was out of necessity in that situation. And from there, I learned about Board of Police Commissioners, connected with Kim Sharobi, with Birdwood House, learned about the Bog Center, Coalition for Police Transparency and Accountability, and just really have been making connections ever since then.
Okay. And you uplift that, and we definitely got to talk about the races, street races. Like I say, Northwestern guy, and the many drags of street races. Like even when my mom was a kid, the Oakman. So like, Oakland Boulevard that stretches. So shout out to Mama Jerry. Mama Jerry remember them street races over that way too. So like it's a street racing culture exists in Detroit, similar to, these movies have taken on a whole form that's far from the root of it, but like Fast and the Furious 1, if people can remember like 20 years ago when that came out, but similar to that. And the Fast and the Furious 1 street race versus the West Warren street race, different culture, okay? That usually, as we know, like it ends in shootouts, but this is like a after hours, summertime. You can imagine like, like even this weekend, as we're in spring, like if it's like about 85 degrees and it's a good strip, people want to show off their cars that they've put money into. Definitely with that, it's going to be alcohol. Oftentimes, as we uplift in other cultures, you're going to have men and women and that dynamic of that sexual tension there, bravado, machismo of men, and also alcohol, drugs, and definitely it's not like regulated in any way. Mm-mm. And it's known. Like you go to the street races around 3:00, they probably wrap up like around 5:00. If you plan on not seeing danger, you probably want to leave around 4:00. This is just like the thought process of what's happening in some of this Detroit culture. And it's sad because these races are taking place, like you say, in where neighbors are. And let's just disregard the shootings that are, imminent danger and lethal danger to people. Just the noise pollution, because it's not like this is not silent. People are dragging up with Flowmasters and specifically like getting their Corvettes and cars out for this. So loud engines, and then skirting and doing donuts and things like that. Just imagine you're sound asleep, and then from basically 3:30 in the morning to about 5:30 in the morning, you just hear, and then people smashing down Hennessy bottles right after it's over, and you're running across all types of like, what type of drugs being used, condoms, underwear, Coney Island half-eaten food, and God knows what else. And this is your neighborhood.
Right.
That's the street races at the end of it. During the street races, like the camaraderie, the fun of it. And like you say, I think it's a way to organize a lot of this. At the time, Chief White, I remember in that time, because it was even prevalent during COVID-19, where it's like, let's get on the lodge with it, because people ain't outside. If people remember the on the lodge with it campaigns, where it's like, this is danger. I think Vice even came and did a story about it. And Crispy Tay, the guy, like, it's live in the D. I was telling, he was like in that, and I was telling him, I was like, some of this kind of can be looked at like not understanding the layers of what's going on here. And it's a way to present this where, and function for this, where we're still understanding in community, right? How did your response change some of that culture to understand that we need to take this another place? And uplifting that classic long Kari Frazier question, still know that, like, okay, we understand some of those same frustrations and being heard, but we just got to organize this, because it's also now, I was at a couple community meetings where they're trying to figure out ways to, like, design things to make it uncomfortable for people to sit and quote unquote loiter or do some of this stuff, where in reality, we just want to engage people in a way where they feel more productive, more engaged, and are a part of whatever we're doing.
Yeah. I think, as you say that, Kari, I think about like a broader consideration. So as people, it's important that we have these creative outlets, right? For some people, it's racing. For some people, it's, painting, art, whatever it is, right? We need these creative outlets. But when you take a step back and consider others in your decisions, right? How do we seek out having our own needs met while considering the impacts to somebody else? And how do we come to that compromise so that my needs are not more important than somebody else's needs?
Yep.
Right? So, yes, I need this creative outlet. I'm in the cars. I want to, have this camaraderie and everything. But now I have blocks and blocks of community members who have to work in the morning, who have to take their kids to school in the morning. And I've completely upended their lives so that I can meet this need that I have over here. And I think that's how all of us need to think about as we're going about life to have our needs met, making sure that we're not stepping on somebody else's needs and ability to live a fulfilling life as well.
I agree. I definitely agree. I don't know. I know it was like some talks about that, like even turning, if people remember, like the go-kart track that was off Oakman, like converting spaces and places like that, do this safely. It has to be a way to take that energy and harness it, even though I know a lot of people feel like, oh, if you organize it, it's going to take away some, but it still will be better for everybody across the board. It's the same debate when the people say, why are you going to play basketball in the street? It's the same discussion. You know what I'm saying? If we put the court in the neighborhood, that's going to be better for everybody around. Now, does it feel like the street basketball or alley basketball? No. But now you don't have to, you can play a full game. It can be organized. So I definitely feel uplifted in that. What did your community do to change the culture of that?
So when we had the conversations with DPD, they agreed to position officers in those spaces around the time that people typically started gathering so that people just wouldn't gather. We're like, You're not going to fix this once there's hundreds of people out here. And it took a while because they started posting up, like, you're posting up at the wrong time. This is not when this is going on. And so they finally, got the schedule together. And then after that, that corner, which is still a vacant lot that's owned by the city, we started to plant gardens over there and just transform that space into a positive area. Now, we have a neighbor who go down there and set up and cook, which will cause some level of gathering, but it's a different type of vibe, right? Like, first of all, it's on his block, right? It's not some people that came from all over the city and all over the state and sometimes across the country to convene in this space. Like, this is his space, right? And then there's an understanding that we're going to clean up afterwards. And, so it's more of like community using their own space rather than other people coming in and abusing the community space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's what we've been doing. We clean up. We're getting ready for Motor City Makeover coming up. We always clean up that space, and we'll be planting flowers and vegetables. And it's nice because there are 4 bus stops right at that corner. And so sometimes I'll kind of look out my window or look like down the street, and people that are waiting on the bus will check out the garden. We always welcome people, take a couple tomatoes with you, whatever. It's just open.
And this is also where, I mean, it's happened to me. When that break-in happened at my house, I looked at it and I looked at my house and I'm like, I put so much into like this equipment and all this other stuff I do, but the aesthetics really does play it plays into how people interpret things. It's that Martin Lawrence had that joke about like, if I walk in your bathroom and it's just junky, I feel like I can pee anywhere. Whereas if it's, which I'm not approving of this behavior, but it's still psychological. If the community looks well kept, if the something as simple as the grass being cut changes the way a person feels about throwing that bottle out the window. Should they want to throw the bottle out the window? No. Mm-hmm. But if you see manicured grass and landscaping and if it is, and my lady, shout out to Erin and all that she does with the rain gardens and the natural plants, but if it's not organized and it doesn't look in design, we're not seeing native plants. We just see, oh, let's throw some tires over there. Mm-hmm. Because that's how people are interpreting things. So it's an onus on community to make sure the aesthetics convey a message. Hence, I'm big into the space and even the design of Dr. Gloria House. Mama and Dad wrote a whole dissertation about this, but like universities and public spaces, it's a reason why you have that big front lawn on in front of the university, because it's going to change as you walk past like all of this landscaping and weird shaped bushes and stuff. It's going to change your attitude naturally. It's a reason a cathedral ceiling is so high. It changes people's attitude and perception. So when I see that garden space and I see these flowers, I'm not saying that it's gonna stop a person completely from doing, from saying like, okay, let's set up a street race here, but you're gonna usually keep it moving. Whereas if you see something so disheveled, houses broken, and it's already trash around, you like, well, don't nobody care about over here anyway, so let's go on and keep adding to whatever chaos I want to bring.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Agree. And so we continue to improve, like you said, the aesthetics, because you have to keep your space looking like you care about it. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, nobody else care about it.
Definitely. So in this journey, police commission, and that's where we're at. You're running in that District 7 seat.
I am.
Why, how, and what was the interest to go to something that is very, if a person's ever watching, you can watch online, the Board of Police Commission meetings, it's oftentimes, like, sometimes you'll get some colorful exchanges, but it's still very litigious, like the contracts and things like that. Like, it's a lot to follow, but it is the space and place where people can have a say in the way that the police engage and interact with us as a general public.
Yep. So, and that's exactly why I'm looking to engage in that space. I've been engaging in the Board of Police Commissioner space for several years now. I was their secretary in 2023, learned a lot in that role, and really just looking for us in Detroit to embrace the intention of the board, why it was put into the city charter in the first place, to have civilian oversight of the police department, which not many cities don't have that. Mm-mm. And that's something that is a benefit in Detroit if we'll leverage it. And one of the responsibilities of the Board of Police Commissioners is to establish policy for the police department. That is the very foundation of what police do, what they don't do, and how they do what they do. And then on top of that, you build out and you deal with the culture aspect of things. But that's a very positive, can be a positive and powerful tool if we can leverage it. And so I'm looking forward to serving all of Detroit, as the District 7 Police Commissioner. The elections are this year. And so, we're going through campaign season right now. And even now, so I'm a member of the Coalition for Police Transparency and Accountability. We've been doing a lot of work recently on policy with the police department and submitting our recommendations. And anybody can do that. You can submit your ideas for policy to the Board of Police Commissioners and have that considered. And it's our responsibility to engage at that level. The other thing that we're working on is an ordinance, which is before City Council, to require the release of body-worn camera footage anytime the police use force against a member in our community. And Chicago has that. You can go right on their portal. You can see just pick a date. And if there was force used, then you'll see the videos, you'll see the reports. They'll redact what is required on the report, but it's very transparent. And so we need that transparency because we can't make decisions about where we want and don't want police engaged if we don't have all the information and there are other people controlling the narrative.
Definitely. So with that's a full Detroit is different. I got the classic questions, but before that, how do a person get out to you? How do they reach out to you if they're interested in finding out more, your campaign and other works that you're doing?
Yeah, so my website is victoriacamille.com, VictoriaCamille.com. You can also find me on Facebook and Instagram at Victoria, 4, Your Voice. And phone number is 313-989-3538. That's my personal cell. And yeah, look forward to hearing from anybody who wants to talk about police oversight and alternatives to policing. That's really what we need to get to.
Gotcha. They're going to be like, I can cross you over. I'm just All right. Classic Detroit is different questions here. Very first car, year, make, and model, year you got it.
Okay. I had a Mazda 323, I think it was.
Okay.
And what year? So I had to get that somewhere around 2000.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Where's the first place you went when you got it?
Probably class on Wayne State campus.
Oh, man.
or to work at Henry Ford. I don't know. Nowhere special.
That's like, you ain't want to go for a cruise.
No.
You're like, back to work.
Back to work. I told you I pushed myself, Kari.
I know. It's like, yeah. So now that I'm off the bus and getting rides, I'm going to just do what I've done regularly. All right. You're the DJ at the end of the fireworks. Woodward and Jefferson. You get to play 2 songs. What songs you playing?
What songs am I playing? I'm playing Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of the name of the song. Fantasy? Is that?
I'm with it.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. That's a great one. And what else?
And then let's say Kim, I Get Lifted.
Okay. All right. You gonna keep people in a great positive vibe. I'm with it. Yeah. I'm definitely with it. The Elements and Kim, you keeping it Detroit and Philly. I love it. All right. And then we close out. If you could rename Detroit after one Detroiter, rename Woodward after one Detroiter, who would it be and why?
Let's do Ron Scott.
Okay.
Yeah, because we're at a pivotal moment now where we are moving. We are going to move beyond police brutality and tensions in police and community relations and move into true community safety and alternative ways of being.
Well, I love you uplift that. Rest in peace, Ron Scott. A lot of work in that coalition against police brutality and so much more that has been done in efforts. Thank you for joining us for our closing George Floyd moment panel.
Looking
what's
forward to
changed, what has not changed.
Mhm.
So that'll be coming up May 31st, and we're looking forward to that big time. And speaking to that, and y'all know I got so many takes. Shout out to Officer Gomez's set here, and now I'm sharing some reels about that, and people are commenting. I definitely, as a black man in America, have many takes on the role of police and what it is. I often think it's so tough, like just applying the critical thought process of policing itself, and also understanding that a lot of what policing is fighting is crime, quote unquote. I believe that me as a black man is labeled into criminality often, and also just being in a community like mine, going to NO, Northwestern, knowing the kids from Vinewood and so much more, P-Town and all that, Philadelphia, Pingree, Carter, Gladstone, Linwood, 12th Street, all of this over here, Zone 8, across the bridge, the number streets, the crime is out of lack of opportunity. So you're punishing people from already being in some of these conditions, like social workers, social determinants of health, social determinants of wealth, social determinants of education, social determinants of so many of these other things that force people into these positions. And now they're getting punished on top of things. And it's tough because, like you say, how do you take towards the consideration for others with that empathy, like the street races? But a lot of people can't even necessarily take the empathy towards themselves to even get towards thinking of others per se. And we do have a society that also is very violent, and I know I'm giving like that long final thought here, but I want to button it up the right way so people know my stance on a lot of this, which I've given before, but I want y'all to understand. I strongly believe that America's a criminal enterprise, founded into criminality, very violent nation. So then to turn around and say, hey, we got to put laws on it under the grounds of precedent is very tough. Now, like I always put it, it's a stolen land, it's stolen labor, and like I always say, it's a stolen loan. That Boston Tea Party story that they told, it sounds good. But in reality, even if we go to the laws of the land, this was money that was given from the crown to quote unquote settle and colonize this nation that we never planned to pay back in the first place. So even at people in arms of what's happening now from a presidential space, I often, some of the organizers, like me and shout out to Russ. I love Russ. Like when he'll say, oh, Donald Trump's doing da, da, da. I'm like, what president was it? You know what I'm saying? So like in functioning in how we move forward and where it is in America, we just got to be mindful of the history of a lot of this, be understanding of it. And I do believe that the solution is in a lot of the work that you've done. It's in organizing our communities and our people to have that empathy and have critical thinking skills and know that systems will play a role in how we're in systems, but it's going to be us within community that really, I think, creates the asset and that quality of life that we all want.
Absolutely.
With that,
thank you, Kari.
Thank you.
Detroit is different. Yeah, Detroit is different. Words of the streets, stories in life we lead. Detroit is different. Detroit is different.